Hello, this is Michael. Welcome to week 6. So now that we've reached the halfway part, you may want a little tour of where we're heading. So if you look at our pyramid here, you all went out and found a source of data. So remembering all that you kind of maybe found it somewhere or scraped it. If it's not clear, that data was just a template, a starting point for you to explore ways to organize it and present it. So if there was any concern, we're actually not interested in the source or the initial purposes of where you got that data. We just want to look at it and be able to maybe push it together with something else. Find more fields, more things of interest because you might have not found everything just available from scraping a site. So expanding it and looking at it and organizing it in some manner using words, taxonomies. So we had an idea that perhaps there's things like categories that group things together in your data that you could have already found. There are lots of ways to group and categorize data. So if you're wondering where we're at, we did the data and now we put it into some kind of pattern. So just to let after all these weeks, we really haven't gotten very far. We have put HTML to kind of give our data just like a communality with other data. So the HTML that we're using are things like headings, article, and sections, and so forth, to give a feeling that there's some kind of relationship that these things have, which they do, but these are things that you've added to it. So we're at the next stop, which is to present that as being some sort of information, and that means humans are now going to get involved, and whenever humans gets involved, things get more complicated. So just so you know, right before this week, we could have kind of done all this ourselves. I think most of the explorations that we've done have been kind of internal teams. Now we have to worry about the outside world. And so we want to present something to people and help them be able to use it to create this feeling of like, well, this is at least information, something that I can understand. So that being said, we've got, as always, we've got a module for this week that explains what we're going to be tackling. So if last week was called nouns or taxonomies, things that are used to sort of factually describe things, we're going to talk about verbs, which is how actively people start to interact with information. So that takes us, as always, to the mural, and that'll be number 6. And just so it's clear, as Saturday comes around, that mural for that week is, in a sense, done. So I know we still have lots of activity on Sundays. I'd like to bring that down to as little as possible for the reason that hopefully you've all seen, which is there's lots of great conversations. There's maybe 10 conversations going on at once, which is another part of this class, is like, how does that work and how do we keep our brains wrapped around this? But having all those different conversations, we do want to bring those to a close because that iteration, being able to get other people's feedback, really has to end, and we go on to the next. So just to remind everyone, if you're not getting all the feedback you need before Saturday, please don't rely on that one day to get everything that you need in order to especially submit a assignment. Now, so the activities this week are pretty straightforward. The module explains a lot, but there's also some articles here, as usual, that might be a little bit more tactical. And so we're going to try some things. We're going to be looking at what navigation styles are. So the first activity here is to pick from this list and post an example of that navigation style. And one thing I'd like, this almost encourages people to get in here early, which is pick one, and once it's picked, please pick a different one and try to tell me what navigation style is being used there. Now, often navigation styles are used in conjunction with other navigation styles, so I'm not going to be too picky, but I do want there to be sort of activity early on that. And then we're going to start sitemapping. And this is an interesting topic, this idea of a sitemap. I've given you some examples here. That's where you really look at, well, how are people going to get around this content? You've given it a little bit of thought, which is fantastic. You're just going to kind of keep going with that. You're going to expand upon it. And then lastly, maybe there's some special things that you need to know. Right now, we're not really too concerned about in a sitemap about what device or what kind of screen you're looking at, but we'll get there next week. So there's some thoughts here about different navigation styles for different kinds of devices. So that being said, I'm excited to be grading your work this week, and will certainly be available for anyone who has questions. As always, let's go ahead and use this forum to ask questions from each other. I will say that your HTML work will be used again when you start to visualize this, which will come very shortly. But you, in a sense, are abandoning it. I mean, it's there to help you think about what things are still grouped together, and I will track them back. But if you're worried about having to continue to maintain HTML, the whole point of the HTML assignment was to understand semantic markup and understand how your information relates to each other and how some importance could be given to different pieces and unimportance to other pieces. So I think you've all tackled that well. I'm looking forward to the grade, and we'll get on with the week.